Previously on the Top 25 Games Showcase 2021.
Minecraft might be one of the most important games of all time.
These gadgets are useless.
Now, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is, I believe, the ultimate incarnation of the series.
Persona 4, which should actually be my favorite game of all time, but no, I chose another game to be my favorite game of all time.
And finally, my fear of sequels to action games is gone! Hello, Viddy of ViddyOGameForFun here, bidding you all a welcome back to the Top 25 Games Showcase 2021. We're going to get into the games quicker this time after the 7 minutes of introducing everyone before. Hopefully you've not forgotten the names of everyone from last episode, but very quickly in regards to that, I want to thank you all so much for the feedback, discussion and comments from last episode. It was so much fun talking in the premiere live chat with you all. And I want to thank you for the comments posted after the live chat as well. Thank you. So, episode 1 was finished last week. Let's get started. With the game at number 15, we're getting off to another awkward start. And not because I didn't play much of this game. I played the game for sure this time. It was because with all the time there was to make these videos, I only got one explanation for this game. One person chose this as their Tier 1 game, and others put it in Tiers 3, 4 and 5. I guess it is mostly down to me to critique this game, so to speak. Then again, I don't know what is harder, doing that, or playing the actual game itself. Bloodborne, published by Sony Computer Entertainment, now Sony Interactive Entertainment, and developed by From Software, was released on the PlayStation 4 in 2015. The setting of this game is the Gothic city of Yharnam, where there exists a cure known as Pale Blood, a practice of blood ministration. You, the player, as a hunter, go to this city to seek a cure for your illness, only for a mysterious plague to make things very complicated. The visits to the Hunter's Dream and attacks with mobs of huntsmen are only the beginning, as you try to solve the mystery of the plague and the city and dangerous entities around you. A game with impressive production values and art direction, this game is a spiritual successor of sorts to the Demon and Dark Souls games, also by From Software. The story is mostly up to interpretation, with dialogue and notes scattered throughout. Also, like the aforementioned From Software games, this game is indeed very hard. The combat is more fast-paced and offensive than the Souls games, but you still have to be careful not to die. If you do, you lose blood echoes obtained from defeating enemies that act as a form of currency and experience points. Going back and forth between the checkpoint-like lanterns that lead to the Hunter's Dream, complete with enemies respawning, and making sure you don't lose the blood echoes completely when dying a second time is what makes up the challenge of the game, complete with very formidable bosses. The compelling Gothic Victorian-era inspired world is full of interconnected areas, and it's actually a pretty cool moment to find a shortcut that makes traversal that bit easier and more interesting. After this lengthy action RPG adventure, the other character builds and stats to play with, new game plus, online content, chalice dungeons and an expansion titled Beyond Hunters, and you've got a game that is hard to put down, no matter how many times you may die. Okay, let's finish this up with Mogomic's explanation of this PS4 exclusive. Take it away. Goodbye.
So let's talk about Bloodborne. I mean, it's Victorian Lovecraftian Dark Souls.
like, what's not to love? I love this game for all the same reasons as the Souls series, the lore, the setting, the music. But where it stands apart is the gameplay is just so smooth and nice, and just feels amazing to play. It's just fast-paced Dark Souls, and there's something very satisfying about slaying eldritch horrors, you know?
Puppy power!
Charlie's favorite games.
It is fitting that another game on Charlie's list is one of the Paw Patrol games. Anyways, I had to pause to remember one thing about this dog-themed game that I saw on a Twitch stream, I think. Even for its younger target demographic, there are segments that are hard to the point of... Additional, Charlie says he doesn't like the wolf-like scourge beasts in Bloodborne. Of course he doesn't. They're downright nasty. You know what is funnier than Charlie's commentary there? What the game at number 14 is, especially considering what games people chose alongside this title. This title might be more familiar to many gamers, especially those who haven't played it. Ooh, sounds like a meme. This game is more than a meme though. There are more explanations this time, and they point out the nuances and complexities in the production values and gameplay.
If you only play one Souls-like / Soulsborne game, make it the first. Or the second if you count Demon Souls as the first.
Dark Souls, Dark Souls, Dark Souls. Where would this list be without Dark Souls? Well, the world, the setting, the lore, the gameplay, the music, you know, the usual. Love it all.
Dark Souls, developed by From Software, was first released on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2011, followed by a PC version in 2012 and a multi-platform remastered release in 2018. The story featured in the game is mostly up to interpretation, complete with sparse and often cryptic dialogue and descriptions about the world, items, characters and monsters. But let's go with the beginning. First there was the Age of Ancients dominated by dragons. Then the primordial flame, the first fire, appears, giving form, balance and distinction to the world, and especially 4 Lord Souls that end up destroying the dragons. This new age of fire seems great for a time, but the fire starts to fade. Darkness starts to take over, and humans start to succumb to an undead curse that gets worse the more they die. You, the player, are one of these undead, a chosen one, so to speak, escaping the undead asylum to go on a quest to find the fate of the undead. And in this quest, you will, as befitting an undead, die over and over and over and over again.
No matter how much I play it, it still manages to kick my butt sometimes, and the sense of accomplishment you feel when first beating a boss is next level.
It is perhaps this level of difficulty that Dark Souls is notorious for. In fact, Zach, who placed this game in tier 3, says, Dark Souls is not a game I will play again for a long time. It took me 2 years to complete this game, albeit with many long breaks in between sessions, as it was so difficult. I am not the most skilled at combat usually, so I found this one really tough. I knew it would be a challenge, but this meant that I felt so satisfied after every successful battle. But there is perhaps more to this game than that.
Dark Souls is the only game in the franchise that has an almost truly open-ended Metroidvania world that you can go to and from almost anywhere entirely on foot. The combat is sufficiently weighted, and the timing for parrying, while not being as lenient as Demon Souls, is intuitive enough to add another layer of options to fighting.
I also, love tinkering around with new builds. It's so much fun. I love this game.
Plus, in terms of world building, this game still does it best and has probably the least convoluted story out of the Soulsborne collection, as well as the most engaging world both mechanically, aesthetically and even emotionally.
And it's crazy, the series of, it's almost defined a new genre really, and it's fantastic.
To finish off his discussion about this in-depth challenging action RPG, I'll quote from the end of Zach's explanation here. Although I am a little scarred, the whole experience was epic, and the level design and combat make this one of the coolest games I have played. Praise the sun, we don't have to talk about a Soulsborne game for number 13, as good as those are. Instead, we're going way back in time to what is, out of the top 25, the oldest game. Not the oldest game as determined by everyone's lists, just in the top 25. But age has not diminished this game's fun factor. The game at number 13 could generally be considered one of the best games on its respective console. Described by Al Younger as an excellent all-around package with a compelling world, great controls and great variety while also having more depth than its prequels, Super Mario Bros. 3, published and developed by Nintendo, was first released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1988, and re-released for Super Mario All-Stars and especially for the Game Boy Advance in 2003 under the title of Super Mario Advance 4 Super Mario Bros. 3.
I love me some Nintendo 2D platforming games, and I just simply love Super Mario Bros. 3.
The story is somewhat similar to Super Mario Bros., except it essentially takes place in the 7 countries of the Mushroom World, and Bowser's 7 Koopaling children cause chaos by stealing the royal magic wands and turning the Mushroom World's kings into animals. It is up to Mario and Luigi to resolve this dilemma. It is, as Ali Younger says, a large game that is also filled to the brim with neat stuff like the hidden warp flutes, wandering enemies on the map, and secret map encounters, especially for a 1988 NES game.
I would really like to know, how did people figure out that you had to crouch for like 4 or 5 seconds as Mario, and then you had to go behind this like movie backdrop to get the warp whistle in Mario 3, that very first one. I think Nintendo Power had something to do with it, and the movie The Wizard, which showed that clip. I think this game got a lot of hype, and it did live up to it.
This hype, so to speak, is due to the elaboration on the gameplay of the previous Mario games, and the new elements that would mostly end up becoming staples of the franchise.
What I love about this game is that the game developers just took it up another level. They went out of their world with all these worlds that they created. You have ice, you have water, you have desert. The very same theme levels that we see today in Mario games. And some creativity thrown in, like the big small world of number 4. I always hated World 7. It always gave me some trouble.
This is the Mario game that introduced the overworld maps and brought a ton of new power-ups like the Tanuki and Frog suits.
I love the suits, the frog suits, and the others when you turn into a statue. Goomba Shoe only appears once. That's it. I mean, that's pretty darn cool. I like that. Makes the level very memorable. As you can see, they just turned things upside down a little bit. It's still the same old Mario. You're still jumping, but they just added a lot of creativity and personality to the game. The airship levels, I love the scrolling effect. I'm not a big fan of scrolling, but in this case, I am. And I also love those tank levels, especially how they mix things up in World 8 with some regular levels and those like airship armada type levels. It kind of creates this like defense force for Bowser.
The version I grew up with was the Super Mario All-Stars version with the better graphics and the updated music. I played the NES version before, and I think that version is still playable, and I can even see why people would prefer that version. But I personally prefer the SNES version because I'm just biased.
And the other music that I want to bring up is I like the Underground music, how it does a really nice remix of the original Underground theme. I'm not gonna lie, some of those fortress levels I did get stuck at. It was a little bit of a maze, and you know me, I don't find mazes all that amazing at times.
I put a lot of time in this game, and I still remember the time I beat Bowser as Luigi when I was a kid.
Could it be the best 2D Mario game? Well, Al Younger, who placed this in Tier 2, finally says, I don't think later 2D Mario games have topped it in terms of world building. Hell, the new series doesn't even come close. Okay, so Super Mario Bros. 3 rode on a lot of hype back in the day, but is it possible its hype doesn't match the one back then for the game in number 12? There were delays, there was waiting, there was probably concern, especially as the game's source code was actually leaked. But if the inclusion of this game in the showcase is any indication, it was worth the hype and wait, and then some, especially after those who had played the previous game surely accepted a job at the story's end.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine.
Half-Life 2, published and developed by Valve, was first released on the PC in 2004, before being re-released or ported to other platforms and compilations like the Orange Box in the years to come. Taking place roughly 20 years after the events of the first game, you, the player, take control of silent protagonist Gordon Freeman from a first-person perspective. Very similar to before, right? Well, an elusive group known as the Combine have taken over Earth, turning it into a brutal dystopia. Gordon Freeman, with his crowbar and other weapons, joins a resistance movement against the Combine, but a familiar teleport accident amongst other things makes Gordon's journey more difficult. One of the more highly anticipated sequels in gaming history, the game's development was focused on high-tech production values by use of the source game engine, including really amazing looking NPCs that interact with Gordon more than those in the first game did.
The plug. Dear me, you're right. Gordon, would you mind? Excellent.
You gonna let Gordon throw the switch?
Gordon, go right ahead. Very good. Final sequence. Commencing now.
I can't look.
And once again, there are no cutscenes, just dialogue, background details, and even tutorials that are subtly part of the environment. These aspects work really well if Zach's explanation of his tier 3 choice is any indication. The atmosphere of Half-Life 2 was what made it stand out for me. It was chilling and gruesome, but stunning in every way.
I don't think any video game has better pacing than Valve's Half-Life 2. The game can really ratchet up the tension, but when it wants to, it knows when to pull back, just give you a moment of peace and quiet, and let you breathe.
This applies to the gameplay, which is not all about action and shooting. Much of the quieter moments focus on puzzle solving and exploration, and this is where physics are instrumental to the game. Whether it is the weight and movement of objects, the buoyancy of the water, and especially the gravity gun that you get partway through the game, the work on the advanced physics systems and so on paid off. Almost every chapter is different, including exploration, shooting, puzzle solving, and vehicle sections, not to mention numerous secrets. Zach confirms how even today Half-Life 2 is still good by finally saying, I rediscovered the game when the Orange Box came out, which also featured Team Fortress 2. Half-Life 2 was even better the second time around, and now that I'm thinking about it, it might be time to give it another go.
It's got a really simplistic, natural, easy to pick up and play design. It's just fantastically put together, and I'm never going to get bored of replaying this.
Half-Life 2 is good on atmosphere and could even be considered a bit scary. But it's not a horror game. This is the category that the game at number 11 falls under. But then again, does it though? Horror is subjective as to what is actually scary for each person. But this game went into a different direction for both its genre and series. This game inspired gameplay mechanics in so many other games, and many, myself included, keep on returning to it.
Resident Evil 4.
Resident Evil 4, published by Capcom and developed by Capcom Production Studio 4, was first released on the GameCube in 2005, before being ported on quite possibly every other platform over the years. Featuring Resident Evil 2's protagonist Leon Kennedy, the player's mission is to rescue the president's daughter Ashley Graham from a cult and many more terrorists besides. That did not consist of the mainstay zombies. No zombies? In a Resident Evil game? What reactions were there, and then some, to this new entry in the survival horror franchise?
Now, I've heard people argue that Resident Evil 4 is responsible for the decline of the franchise owing to its shift in focus from horror to action, but to me, it was exactly what the franchise needed. The first 2 games were great, but with 3 and Code Veronica being more action-oriented with Jill's assault rifles and Claire dual-wielding SMGs, the series had started to stray way earlier, and while 2002's Resident Evil remake managed to recapture and reinforce the franchise's horror first, RE0 misstepped so hard it almost walked the entire series off a cliff edge. Then came RE4, the first game to really press down hard on the gas pedal with his action, but at the same time maintaining the sense of dread every time you heard a chainsaw revving up, or a regenerator stilted breathing in a dark hallway. And balancing it all so well that the silly B-movie story didn't take away from the horror's tension and said horror didn't detract from the camp silliness, both elements juxtaposing nicely to enhance the effect of each other.
I think in the context of history, Resident Evil 4 is a divisive game because it's a turning point between the franchise shifting from all-out horror to all-out action. But for me, this is always going to be the perfect compromise between those two.
If nothing else, the fact that I've bought this on GameCube, PS2, PS3 and PS4 and completed it on each console should be proof that this is a game I'll never get bored of going back to.
The Nintendo reviewer also has Resident Evil 4 as a favourite on his list and on tier 4. He said about it, great balance of Resident Evil horror and action with a way better aiming system, tough bosses and challenging puzzles. RE Revelations has these too, plus you can move while aiming, but RE4 feels like a bigger horror adventure, especially in the castle. Overall, with a good balance of horror and action, engaging gameplay, nice production values, and extras and so on that kept people coming back for more, Resident Evil 4 is a different yet stellar chapter in Resident Evil history.
Okay, it's game time.
While we can ponder on whether other Resident Evil games go into the showcase, let's actually look at an IP mentioned in episode 1 of the showcase. It could be argued that this is the game that is the worldwide sensation of the series, but is that a good thing in the long term? What about the other games? Whatever pieces of stylish gaming fiction you prefer, all I can say is that we are in the top 10 and it's very exciting.
Persona 5 is what got me back into anime, got me back into RPGs.
This game is just pure art. It's pure art. From the god tier soundtrack, art style, dialogue, story, the menus. Woo boy!
Persona 5, developed by Atlus, was first released on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 in 2016, followed by a worldwide release the following year and an enhanced version titled Persona 5 Royal, released in 2019/2020. It is, as Joker says, a social simulator as well as a JRPG, where you take the role of high school second-year student Joker and uncover magical powers, and with those powers, change the hearts of your targets. Also, he says, I may be biased with this since it's the game I've based my username around, but I'll try to be fair. It is in tier 2 on his list, by the way.
I'm not one to really praise graphics, but would seriously just look at them. Persona 5 is all flash and all substance. And yeah, I also like the Space Palace.
Polyplays, placing this game in tier 2, says, this game is pure aesthetics. The character design, the music, the presentation, and even the menu system, everything. It just presents itself in such a consistent way and no choice feels out of place. Joker adds, Persona games always have a colour to go by and use that colour to be stylish. Persona 5's colour is red, which is used a lot, as well as black. The designers were really creative and the art of the game is just perfect. My favourite piece of art of the game is the pause screen.
You can get so much enjoyment from this game, it's insane.
The gameplay is perfect, Joker says. They nailed everything with this entry. As Joker's speed is really good, the game feels like an open world, the battle commands are mapped to one button each, and the frame rate never drops. Holly Plays continues, the sheer number of options to this game is daunting, but gives it so much replayability, letting you choose different activities and how you spend your free time, which characters to spend time with, altering stats for battle, and just general side story progress. The dungeons or palaces in this game really interested me, and I loved how they represented the story and characters involved. Joker also says, the game puts a good balance between story and gameplay. The story of Persona 5 is strange for me. While I love the game, the story and the characters are kinda flat? I mean, the characters are great and the story is decent, but it cannot reach Persona 3's or Persona 4's story.
The characters are great, the best one being Ryuji. If you say otherwise, we can't be friends. It's the law. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules.
For real? And since Royal is the updated version of Persona 5, you get a couple of additional characters that put a slight twist on the existing story and additional quality of life improvements that make the game the definitive way to play Persona 5.
The music is masterful.
Indeed, Joker says, the music of Persona 5 is mostly jazz and rock, but there are multiple types of music in the game. The music changes depending on if it rains or not, which is a really good idea, and it fits the game's style and story really well. The best song in my opinion is Rivers in the Desert, a track you hear near the end game.
Remind us what we're here for, creating new life, creating rivers in the desert.
The jazz soundtrack should not fit, Holly Play says, but just feels perfect. This game stood out to me from the moment I started playing. Joker concludes by saying, overall a really good game, maybe not my favourite Persona game, but it's up there, and for that, it takes the 5th place in my list.
This is the first game ever to have me cry, and they completely ruined the moment after. If you play this game, you know what I'm talking about. I will not spoil it here.
Listen, if you have the time and have the interest to play a JRPG, this will be the game that you must play. Don't you dare sleep on this game.
Please buy Persona 5. I'm probably not the first person to tell you that, and I'm probably not the last.
You never see it coming. You see that my mind is the best for right.
Okay, so Persona 5 first came out in 2016, but it's largely treated as a game of 2017, a fine year of gaming as some might say. The game at number 9 is also a good example of that. This game was huge. Some might say it is what the franchise it belongs to needed. Some might say it was quite a change. But there's no denying that the game at number 9 is such a great game, especially for launching a new system. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, published and developed by Nintendo, was released on the Wii U and Nintendo Switch in 2017. With a twist on a familiar premise, we see Link at the beginning waking from a 100-year sleep in a healing chamber. He explores a huge open world, gradually regaining his memories, most notably the time spent with Zelda, and prepares to take on Calamity Ganon before it destroys Hyrule.
The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is the only Zelda game I've beaten before, and a good reason for that was the game was the best launch title for the Switch.
Trash Pantycoot, placing this game in Tier 2, says, the only Zelda game I've ever played, a great introduction to the Switch, which had already been out a couple of years before I got one.
Breath of the Wild was the first game I bought and put into my Nintendo Switch, and it sold me on the console. I wouldn't have believed before this that you could say one single video game could sell a console, but this was just it.
This game is still one of the best looking Switch games, and you can easily get lost in the gameplay as you explore the open world of Hyrule.
Indeed, Breath of the Wild is a successful launch title for the Switch, though in the history of the Legend of Zelda series, this was, well, unlike any other Zelda game before or even since. Well, maybe except the first Zelda with its relative lack of guidance and multiple directions to go in. Do things out of order. Climb just about anywhere to get to wherever you want. Plus a glider helps with that. Cook food, utilize resources or talk to fairies to help with stat boosts, fight various enemies, look for Koroks, and there's more besides. Things big and small, some of which may not have even been discovered, complete with non-linear solutions, mostly due to a cool physics engine. Oh, and let's not forget the art style and focus on ambience in regards to music.
There's just so much to do in Breath of the Wild that you can easily put 100 hours into this game and still have many more shrines to go to.
I had so much fun playing it and got sucked right in immediately, Trash Bandicoot says. It didn't expect me to have played every Zelda game that came before, and it had a great mix of battling monsters, big cinematic boss battles with strategies and puzzles.
Taking that Zelda formula and putting it into an open world is exactly what I'd been waiting for years.
This is definitely a must-own Switch game.
Also extremely replayable, just love it, is the conclusion to Trash Bandicoot's explanation. Now many of us are awaiting the game's sequel. How can you possibly talk about a game as big as Breath of the Wild in a few minutes? Well, it is easier to talk more succinctly about the game at number 8, and there's a good reason for that. It's a simple game that surely anyone who even knows a tiny bit about video games should know. And just because it's simple, doesn't mean it's not fun, as shown in the insightful discussion we're about to see.
There isn't anything about this next entry that I can say that you probably don't already know. About 95% of the people I know have played this game and probably still hold on to it and hold it in high regard. And that's Super Mario World.
Super Mario World was one of the games I played the most on my Super Nintendo when I was a kid. I mean, honestly, I think we all know that this game is a classic.
Super Mario World. Oh, yeah, where do I start?
Super Mario World, published and developed by Nintendo, was first released on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1990, and re-released in a special version of Super Mario All-Stars, and especially for the Game Boy Advance in 2001 under the title of Super Mario World Super Mario Advance 2. It tells the familiar Mario tale of Peach getting kidnapped by Bowser and at Dinosaur Land on vacation of all places. A launch title for the SNES, it was fondly remembered if Holly Place's explanation for her Tier 2 choice is any indication. This was my first real game, my first own console, unprompted. I was bought an SNES for a birthday or Christmas gift as a kid. I had no idea what it was, which game. With this game, I had no idea what Mario even was. I fell in love instantly. If Final Fantasy IX is responsible for my love of JRPGs, then this game is responsible for my love of platformers, and quite probably games in general.
Super Mario World makes its place in my top 25 not just because of it having been a remarkably solid game, but also because of the sentimental value of how much time I spent playing it.
It was so cool. I mean, before that, you had all the Nintendo Super Marios, you had just the normal Super Mario, which was that amazing classic platform game, and then you had Super Mario 2, which was a bit of a wacky one, and then Super Mario 3, where you could fly around and you got a leaf and then you became like this little flying raccoon thing. And I think that whole idea of transforming from something small to something big or being able to shoot fire, that was such a cool element of the game. And then in Super Mario World, all of a sudden you can ride a dinosaur, and that dinosaur is Yoshi, who can swallow enemies, and that was so cool just to be able to hop on Yoshi and ride around.
Holly Plays ends her explanation by saying, I loved the overworld map style level selection, the colourful levels, and my best boy Yoshi. At the time I had no idea that wasn't a staple in all Mario games, but he is still one of my favourite characters.
This is some of the finest 2D platforming we've been blessed with, and many 2D platforming games take inspiration from Super Mario World.
I think it's just a case of really good art and a game that actually requires a lot of dexterity and a lot of kind of physical ability. Physical in the sense that, it takes agility. Mario has to be agile. You have to know how to jump and when to jump and how to attack and how to get out of sticky situations. And that's what makes it a cool game.
And even after I had passed the game multiple times, I came back later and had discovered things like the Star World and the Secret World.
I don't know if kids nowadays will be able to experience the feeling of finding secret exits just by finding them on your own, but I'm glad I was able to experience that, which is what made the game that much special.
Do you like retro gaming? Do you like old 2D sprite-based platforms? Have you heard of, touched, or ever played or emulated or found some way of interacting with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System? Then you've played Super Mario World. It's simple. And I would guess you've probably enjoyed it. Do I even need to say any more?
Whether you decide to play Super Mario World on your SNES, Game Boy Advance, Virtual Consoles, the SNES Classic, Switch, emulation, this game is a must play.
It was a game that continually keeps me engaged, and it's something I enjoy playing still to this day. It's simple, but that's what makes it so fun, and I doubt that most of you don't know what I'm talking about.
Super Mario World's story is simple, but that is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Maybe in games we want more of a good story. Skeptics to games might say, well, why not read a book then? Well, it is hard to be a good story if it is part of an interactive visual medium, especially if it gets you all emotional, as shown in the game at number 7. One thing though, all the explanations for this game were done with text. No voiceover or talking to camera. Let's see if I can survive this. The Last of Us, published by Sony Computer Entertainment, now Sony Interactive Entertainment, and developed by Naughty Dog, was first released on the PlayStation 3 in 2013, and then remastered for the PlayStation 4 in 2014, with an expansion pack titled Left Behind, released that same year. It is very much a story-driven game, with humanity living in a post-apocalyptic world brought about by a mutated infection. Sounds familiar, right? The main character is Joel Miller, who truly goes through some brutal hardships. He is tasked with escorting a teenage girl, Ellie, to a group known as the Fireflies, who generally live outside the quarantine zones. The developing father-daughter-like relationship between Joel and Ellie is the heart of the game, as the player explores the environment and goes through one action-packed scenario after another with weapons and stealth to defend against enemies. Let's read out what everyone said about it. Slapnut the DJ, placing this game in tier 4, says, perhaps the best story in a game I've ever played, and the reason I don't want to play the sequel is I don't want to get disappointed. Combat system is not too complicated. Jemry, placing this game in tier 2, says, The Last of Us is like continually getting punched to the gut, but in the form of a really good video game. I think that's really neat because actually getting punched to the gut can make you feel really rough, but this just makes you feel really rough emotionally.
I shot the hell out of that guy, huh?
Yeah, you sure did.
I feel sick.
Zach, placing this game in tier 2, says, The Last of Us is probably the best story I have experienced in gaming. I didn't own a PlayStation 3 or 4, so I was forced to play through the entire game at a friend's house. It was like the old days of watching one episode of the best TV show every week, and it was torture having to wait until the next time I could play the game to advance the story. A masterpiece and seminal moment in gaming.
I have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad.
Trash Panticoot, placing this game in tier 4, says, I was spellbound the entire time I was playing this, and I've never been able to get it out of my mind. It's a visually stunning game. The story is mind-blowing. It's a really satisfying spin on the zombie apocalypse genre, and the characters latch onto your heart and stay with you. I can't wait to play it again to get the platinum.
It's okay, it's me! It's me! It's me! Look! It's me.
He tried to...
Oh, baby girl. It's okay. It's okay.
No.
It's okay.
Oh, getting all emotional here. One aspect of the production values that played into those cutscenes that wasn't really mentioned was the music. Video game music is an important factor in gaming and the memories we make. But what if you could actually make the music yourself? That's not exactly what we're going for with a game at number 6, but it's close enough, complete with a series overhaul that is still fondly looked at to this day. Melbourne City Gamers Tier 1 choice, a memorable game, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, published and developed by Nintendo, was first released on the Nintendo 64 in 1998, before being re-released for the GameCube and even iCube player in 2002 and 2003. An enhanced version titled The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D was released for the 3DS in 2011, which also features an alternative version of a game called Master Quest, but with increased difficulty and altered dungeon puzzles. This version was also originally on the GameCube release alongside the original version, and that bonus is one aspect of many that makes the 3DS release the definitive one for some.
Zelda Ocarina of Time was the first 3D one. It's the one that a lot of us fell in love with back on the Nintendo 64.
The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, I think this game ultimately means more to me than any other game in my top 25. It might not be my actual favorite, but it holds the strongest place in my heart of any game ever, full stop.
This fifth main installment in the Legend of Zelda series sees Link, controlled by the player, going on a big adventure, leaving his humble beginnings in Kokiri Forest to travel the world of Hyrule and even meet Princess Zelda. He prepares to take on an evil man in black armor named Ganondorf by navigating dungeons, exploring the big world, and even traveling back and forth through time. It is somewhat similar to the previous 2D Zelda games, but the transition to 3D changed things around, and in a way that some might say has not been matched or surpassed to this day.
It is the best of the 3D Zeldas to me, even above Breath of the Wild, even above any of the other ones, even Twilight Princess that have come out since. I still think it did it the best.
The graphics, while aged, are great, the music is also terrific, and you even play some of it yourself on the title instrument. The gameplay, whether it's to do with the main content or side content, is excellent, especially in regards to the many dungeons that are important to completion, complete with puzzles to solve.
The puzzle design was fantastic, dungeon design was fantastic.
Danae plays in this game in Tier 4 surely agrees with that, saying, "This game is such a fun and bright puzzle. You really had to put on your thinking cap on to try and solve each level, resulting in hours of entertainment."
It gave us our first real look at what the world of Hyrule looked like. And it will always have a special place in my heart for that reason.
I could talk about how much I love the story of good against evil, the twists, the turns, the music, the puzzles, and the sense of adventure young me felt playing it. But what really sticks to me more than anything is how my completely non-gamer father used to sit and watch me play it. It became a bit of a ritual. I would play and he would watch. I wouldn't play it without him in case he missed something, and seeing a non-gamer enjoy watching the game and being as enthralled by it as I was, for me, speaks loudly enough about why it's a fantastic game and one that is incredibly important to me.
And with game number 6, episode 2 of the Top 25 Games Showcase 2021 has to come to an end. The conclusion next week will cover the top 5 and then some, with some surprises I don't even know of with my current edits. A surprise party? Perhaps, but until then the discussion about the games included or not included is still open down in the comments. So have a good day or night or whatever it is, and I'll see you next week.